welcome. It is possible Tuesday has returned. And yet, my apologies, we are very late, technical difficulties and everything, and you know how it is. But I am so happy that you're here with me this evening, and we are in for a wonderful session. My very special guest is someone I've known for many years, over 20 years. And I'm so happy that she has consented to be with us this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it is possible Tuesday is here. And I want you to remember that God says, I know the plans I have for you. What else does he say? Do you remember? It says, plans for prosperity and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. And Jesus held them and said unto them, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are. I'd like to introduce you to a wonderful young lady who has a color in her surname. She has a wonderful, beautiful smile, and I'm just going to allow her to introduce herself to you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, please introduce yourself to us.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening. How are you doing? So, my name is Stacey Anne-Marie Brown. I'm not sure what else needs to be included in the
Well, for
introduction,
now,
but
we'll just stick with this
okay.
Anne-Marie Brown. Now, Stacey, I've known you for over 20 years. I don't even know if you realize,
Maybe
but it's been
30.
that
Oh, yeah.
long. Yes. And we met in Jamaica. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Jamaica. Where were you born and do you have siblings?
Okay, so I was born in at the Spalding Hospital. So that is essentially in Manchester, but some people refer to it as Clarendon because it's right on the border of Manchester and Clarendon. And my mom.
And do you? Okay.
Go ahead.
So no, you please go ahead.
And I was saying that that was the closest hospital to where my mom was living in Manchester. So that pretty much gives you the reason for the Spalding Hospital.
Children's Hospital. Okay, so your mom lived in Manchester and you were born in Spalding. Where in Manchester did you live, or where in Manchester did you grow up?
I grew up in a very small rural district in Manchester. It's called Octon Betty.
Oh, I know Upton Betty. I
You
know Upton
do?
Betty. And it has such an unusual name. Not many people know it, but quite a number of important people have come from Upton Betty. Yes. And what was life like for you growing up in Upton Betty?
You know, I would say looking back now on my life growing up in Jamaica, I realized I was very poor. While I was growing up in Jamaica, on the hills in Manchester, in Octon Betty, I did not realize that I was poor because it was just the way of life. There was nothing to compare life to. So what you got was the way you live was just pretty much the way you lived. So I grew up with my sister and a few other extended family, but under the direction of my maternal grandmother. So, as I mentioned, growing up in the hills of Manchester, we were very poor, as I could imagine it right now. We had no electricity, no running water. There was absolutely no mode of transportation other than maybe a bus passing through once every couple of weeks. So, and there were days when there was not enough. There was not enough food, and I'm sure that some people or others who grew up under similar circumstances can identify with that way and that upbringing. But even though we did not have much, I don't ever remember complaining that this was not enough. I do not want to eat that meal tonight because that's all we had. So we ate what we had. So I hail from very humble beginnings, and I thank God, and I'm very proud of where God has led me from and where He had allowed me to start my beginnings.
Yeah, lovely. Now, when let me, it's so interesting because I didn't know that you were from Octon Betty um, when I met you. I
Oh,
that you were from Portmore
mm,
because when I met you, I met you in church.
right.
Now, your mom had a very important role to play at our church. What
Mm-hmm.
was that role and how did it impact you?
So my mom, she was one that loved children. Unfortunately, or I won't say unfortunately, but she left my sister and I with my grandmother because she had us at a very, very early age. So she
Mm.
left us with our grandmother to raise us while she went to Kingston to seek employment, and which is why you knew her from that setting in Kingston. So my grandmother raised us while she herself started to was working as a living helper, raising other people's children. So she developed a love for children, or she had a love for children. So her role at the church where you met me, she was children's choir leader. She was Pathfinder director. So she pretty much worked alongside the children. That was her ministry.
Oh, yes. And I know many children will remember Auntie Pat and the
Yes.
children's choir. Any, if I think of any young person or young adult now who attended our church when they were younger, they were in Auntie Pat's choir. And
Yes.
everybody knows your mom as Auntie Pat. Um,
Yes.
and yes, that love for children was always there. She was always with the children. The children gravitated towards her. Now, let me ask you this: with the children gravitating towards your mom, did you ever any time did you're thinking about it? I have to share my mom with all these other children.
No, that thought has never actually crossed my mind. It was just something that she did. And I mean, I was a member of the children's choir as well, and my friends were her children, and we all just grew up under her directorship and the umbrella of her ministry. So I've never had that thought, really. I think the thought that probably came to mind most was the fact that she was taking care of these children that she worked with while other people had to take care of me and my sister, which obviously I loved my grandmother for all she did and all the other people who played some role in my life.
Yes, lovely. And grandparents play a very special role in the lives of quite a number of children growing up in Jamaica. We tend to have our grandparents living with us, or we live with our grandparents, or spend holidays with our grandparents. Now, how many siblings do you have? And are you the oldest, or the youngest, or the middle?
So I'm the oldest. So I'm actually the only child for both my mother and my father together. On my mother's side, I have one sister and one brother. And on my father's side, I have two sisters and two brothers. So you'd say I have three sisters and three brothers.
Okay. So in a sense, you it depends on where you are. You could say you're from a big family or from a small family.
Right.
Interesting. And that's having the best of both worlds. So you lived in Octenbedy with your grandmother. What school did you attend for primary and for high school?
Okay, so I lived while growing up in Octon Betty. I attended the Octon Betty All Age School from grade 1 through grade 5, and then I went to Kingston to Portmore to attend, and I attended Bridgeport Primary for grade 6, and from there I matriculated to St. Hugh's High School, where I spent
Jamaican?
the rest of my high school years, and then I moved on to the University of the West Indies.
All right. Now, was school easy for you? Did you enjoy school? Did you find any subjects difficult? Were you a teacher's pet?
You know what? I loved education. So school for me was where I felt complete. I wrote a poem the other and that was one of the line in my poem. when I wrote about my life's journey, pretty much. So, school, I loved education. I loved to read. I loved. There was nothing that could stop me from going to school. There were many days I did not have, growing up in Octombedi, there were days when I did not have, my grandmother did not have lunch money, or we did not have shoes to wear to school. But we going to school for me was not an option. It was something that was part of me. And school, I would say, loved me back. So
Uh,
since grade one, I mean, I didn't do anything special as it relates to studying, but ever since I stepped foot into first one, I have always been number one. Whenever there's a test given at the end of the year and the teacher placed your rating on that board, Stacey Harriet at the time was first place. Grade one, grade two, grade three, grade four, grade five, I came second. The girl who generally came second, she passed me and she came first. And I was happy for her. I was not sad because I was second. But as I mentioned, it wasn't that I studied harder. It was just a natural gift that I think God placed within me, the love for school and the love for education.
that is so wonderful to hear, Stacy. I like the phrase you used. You said you loved school, and the school loved you back, and your name was always at the top. And the fact that this young lady surpassed you on that occasion didn't make you feel bad. You felt good for her, and that says a lot about the young lady that you are. Now, Stacy, where where did you get this personality from? Where did you get this depth of character from?
I don't want to start crying, but I would say I don't know. I think God just placed certain things in certain people, and I think that was just placed within me. It wasn't anything special that I did, or but I can probably say the upbringing of my grandmother. She was very protective of me and my sister. Based on how she lived, her character, it just certain things just emanated from us, and it based on her prayers and her contact with God and just the way she worked hard just to make sure that we were able to survive even though we did not have much. But I believe that God just placed a certain character within me. By no way, by no means perfect, but I just thank God for certain things that He has instilled in me, and I think that, as I mentioned, came from my humble beginnings.
Well, I'm just sitting here, and you know what? I'm looking back in my mind's eye, and I've always seen you as a well put together young lady. You always carried yourself well. You had a certain poise about you. There was a certain confidence about you. It wasn't pride, it was confidence. You didn't walk with your shoulders hunched, you didn't walk with your head down. You knew you had a place, and you weren't lording it over anybody, but you were a really lovely young lady to be in the presence of. And I would never have guessed that you were coming from such humble beginnings. And I like the fact that you didn't allow your beginnings to depress you. You said that you were proud of it, and you just went through the world knowing your place and doing what you had to do. Now you went to St. Hugh's. Now, how was that transition to from Portmore to St. Hugh's?
I mean, as I mentioned, it was just a way of life. Most people would travel from Portmore to school, and it was just something that we all did. It was just a natural part of our progression through life. We were just happy and elated to be attending high school and to be a part of the education system. But as you mentioned, I have not always been confident, even though I knew where I was coming from, and that part of me always remained. I think even throughout high school, I was deep down, I was sad.
Oh,
I was somewhat sad, and because I mean, my mother worked very hard.
I know.
She worked very hard to provide for me. So some days, I mean, I had little or no lunch money, but I still went to school. And I mean, I grew up in the home of my aunt, and I mean, as much as I really, really appreciated the fact that they took me in, I was not always, I was not always happy, for want of a better word. There were times in my life where I felt like ending it all because I was just sad. And I felt like I was just depressed, but nobody knew that because, as you said, I was never one to walk around without this confidence. So sometimes, people walk around being confident. You never know what's going on deep down. But I had my cousin's girlfriend. She always tells me, Stacey, you know what? Drop down is not dead. And to interpret that, it means that because you're fallen, that doesn't mean that you have died. You can always find a place to rise up again, even though you're down. And I did feel down. Even going to high school, my friends didn't even know this. But I mean, I went to high school sometime. My green was different from their green because my mother had to buy a piece of green material and make my uniform for me to go to school. So mine wasn't the store bought, very rich green material, but I wore that green with pride. Nobody could tell me that I was feeling down because I had that green on. I made sure it was well made, and my mother made that uniform. So, I still went to school and I still did my best, and I still was very happy in the curriculum, or navigating school life. I was very
Yes,
happy
yes.
and very very proud to accomplish all that I accomplished during
Mhm,
school.
mhm. So, oh boy, Stacy, I'm just being bowled over by your story. You know, we don't know what people are going through. And oftentimes people think, oh, your life looks hunky dory. You're a beautiful girl. You're active in church. You had friends. You were always smiling. I've never heard you get in trouble, and I look at you as one of the young ladies who I was happy to have associated myself with as an older person. And you young ladies were a joy for me to be around. Your story is really profound and inspirational, and I'm hoping that those who are listening will recognize, they'll take the nuggets. I like what you've just said. Drop down is not dead. That is so sport. You went to St. Hugh's and then you went to UWI. Did you always dream of going to university?
You know what? My poem again, going to university was always my plan. I always have a strong determination. You know what? I Ever since I opened an accounting book in fourth form, I knew my path. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And after watching Profile, there was this man on Profile who worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers Jamaica, and he was channeling his path through to his accomplishments. And Rhonda, my friends and others were like, we are going to master this accounting class. And that was in fourth form. And we were going to go to the University of the West Indies. Then we're going to go and do our ACCA, which is our professional accounting
Professional.
studies.
Yes.
Before that, we're going to work at a Big Four audit firm. And that's just exactly what we
What?
wanted to do. And that's what we did. That was the
Yes.
path. And so, as I mentioned, I wanted to go to university. After sixth form, all my friends went to university. My mother said, Stacy, there's no money to pay for the tuition. You got to go and work. You got to go
Yes.
and work, at least work for a year. But I know once you get comfortable in that work life, you never want to go. You never want to step out. So I worked for a year and I was miserable. But the
Oh,
Lord placed me at a job, and He placed me with somebody who today I call my mentor, Mr. Paul Ashman. He was my boss, and I was his assistant. And he saw something within me that I knew was within me. And I told him what I wanted to do. I said, I want to go to the University of the West Indies. I just can't be here. I can't be working. And one lunchtime he took me when it was time to apply, and he took me up to the University of the West Indies, and he gave me the form. He carried me to an administrator, and we filled out the form, and we put it in, and I took the student loan bureau forms and I filled those out, and I went to the student loan bureau after my mother walked around to get guarantors, and I went to the student loan bureau line and I stood there, and God granted me the student loan as well as a the student loan, my son, as well
That's
as
all right.
he gave me the opportunity for all 3 years of university to receive not just a student loan, but also a grant that would help me with my books. So I did not want to get lost in the funk of working and doing school part time or never going back. That was not an option for me. I knew where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the University of the West Indies. Then I wanted to go work at a big four firm. Then I wanted to get my ACCA credentials, and I wanted to expand in the that career path.
Uh, Mommy duties are calling. That's fine. But I like there's a you were very eagle-eyed. You're very focused about what you wanted,
Go
and
easy. Go to
the
grandmother.
Lord placed
Go.
people recognize that there were people who would be able to help you and assist you. And I'm really, really impressed by that, Stacy. You and your friends said you were going to be involved in accounting. You laid the foundation, you had your plan, you spoke it into being, and you did not allow anything to remove you from that focus. Now, you know, were you ever discouraged at any time during your time at the University of the West Indies?
Yes, I got discouraged again when I realized that I did not have enough money to go to school every day. So I went to University of the West Indies for 3 years, and there's never a week that I went for the 5 days of the week or all the classes that I needed to go, because
Mm.
some days my mother would give me money that would last for the 5 days, but it was not enough. I had to figure out a way to stretch it, and sometimes it just could not stretch. So I would stay
Yes.
home some days, and I would luckily I enjoy learning by reading. So I would stay home and I would read the books, and I would get notes from my friends whenever they took notes. But there was never a week where I would go all the days of the week when I was
Yes.
required to go. But I wasn't somewhat discouraged. I was just somewhat a little bit I don't know, maybe discouraged or disappointed that I could not go. But I knew that even though I wasn't able to go, I could still learn what
Yeah.
I needed to by reading, because that's something I enjoy doing, and I prefer to learn by reading rather than listening to a lecture. So that worked out in my to my benefit.
Oh boy, you have a strength. Now I've always seen you as confident, but now I'm seeing your strength, your resolve, your resilience as a young woman, as a teenager, young adult, you know, and you could have decided, you know what, I'm going to do something else, but you stuck to your resolve. You had your plan and you're deciding there's nothing that's going to waver me. Now, I know that there's this phrase that says you must embrace people of like mind, or ensure that you have people who will elevate you. Who are some of the people, your peers, your friends, your close community, that you would say you um, relied on, that were your support network?
In high school, I could say, and who this the person who is still my best friend today since high school. You know her, Rhonda Jones, now Rhonda Robinson. She was my best friend, and she became a great support for me. Even, sometimes you wonder why God allows certain things to happen, but she went to university ahead of me, and she was a year ahead of me, and because she was able to purchase the books, she was able to pass those books down to me. Since I couldn't I even though I got the grant was used for different things along with books, but God placed her ahead of me, so once she was done with her books, she passed those books down to me. So she has always been very confident herself, and has always been someone I relied on. And I had a group of friends in high school who we called ourselves the MRTs, because there were 8 of us. Two persons' name began with M, two with R, two with M, two with T, two with S. There are a couple of us, if I did the math right. But we all, almost all of us, were in this accounting class, and we all loved accounting. We all sat at the front, and we were taught of other students as dominating the class. So we were even brought to the principal's office because they said we dominated the accounting class because we were at the front. So our accounting books had to be well ruled, had to be well done, all our tests, everything. So those people were a support because we were like-minded. We were moving in the same direction. We all went to sixth form together. We all went to UE together. So most of us who did accounting and others went on in other areas. But that group of friends, Michelle Swaby, and Rhonda Robinson, my two best friends to date, I mean, they were a great support for me as I went through life and as I leaned on them to help me. They didn't know at the time that they were supporting me, but they really were.
Now, let me ask you, what role did the church play in your life
The
as a
church
Christian
was,
and as
go
a
ahead.
student?
You know what? The church played a tremendous role. The church saved my life. God saved my life because without the church, I don't know where I would be. More than anything else, it's God, it's the church. Those days when I felt sad and I felt depressed and I didn't know what to do, the church. And I had great friends at church as well, who also were a great support, who add joy to my life. So I was at church. Church for me was an escape. It was an
Yes.
escape and it was a blessing. I was at church Sunday night meeting, Monday night for different practices, Wednesday night meeting, Thursday
Wednesday
night
with
for
you,
choir
right?
practice,
Friday.
Friday night for Bible study, whatever it is, Sabbath all day, Sabbath social. Church for me was my security. That's where I found, that as I mentioned, that saved my life. The fact that I was able to get up and go to church and do and have this close group of young people who were also like-minded, who wanted to be there as well. So for me, God God directed and God led.
Wow. Now, you were involved in church, you were involved in school, you were doing well. Life wasn't rosy and anything like that. What what impact did your mom have on you, and how did your mother inspire you
I
to
mean,
achieve?
she was the my greatest inspiration. I mean, without her, I don't think I would have made it because she was the one who provided everything I needed or all I needed, even though she did not have much. Sorry, one
It's
second. Go
okay.
down. Can you go
Mommy,
downstairs and
mommy
wash
duties
it?
are important.
I'm not going to put it on.
Oh, tell grandma mommy said, okay?
I'm not going to.
All right, go here. 1 second.
That's
I
fine.
Go play until I'm done. All right. So as I was saying, my mom, she without a father in the picture, because I didn't meet my father until I was about to enter high school. So my mother took me and we went searching for my dad where we thought he lived. We took a bus, taxi, walked around all night trying to find him. We eventually found him, letting him know I'm about to enter high school. We need some help from him. We never got that help. So basically, she took on the role of both mother and father to make sure that my school fee was paid. I had clothes, I had uniform, I had everything that I needed. So, I mean, she played a very integral role. I remember even at one point, I mean, it was tough, but it was something that was tough but achievable. I remember, I don't know if people know Barbara Gluden, but I remember one when it was approaching another year to go to school, my mother took me to Barbara Gluden's office to see if we could get assistance. She wasn't there, so we didn't get that assistance that we needed, but we ended up, I mean, whatever was worked was just put into that school fee, because high school fee, even now and back then even more, wasn't cheap. You had to find the money, and you had to find the money for everything else. So she was the one who did all of that.
And I tell you, I lift my hat to Auntie Pat because I know she worked hard. I know she worked hard, but we never saw her complaining. She always had a smile on her face. And I'm not joking. Auntie Pat always had a smile on her face. She always had a pleasant word. She was never grumpy or anything like that. And that's one other reason why the children gravitated towards her. You know,
Mm-hmm.
her aura was positive and endearing. Now you say you have a sister and a brother. Um, do they see you as a role model? Did they say, "Oh, my sister is achieving, I have to do the same"? Were you encouraging them? What's the relationship like with your siblings by
You
your
know,
mommy's
well, speaking, if I go on my mother's side, my sister is just a year younger than I am. So we grew up side by side. You know, at an early age, she migrated to the US and I stayed in Jamaica. But I think we both had the same resolve. We both had the same strong determination to succeed. I see her as probably one of the most brilliant person that I know, and today she is a doctor of nursing practice.
practice?
So she
Yeah.
has a drive and a determination like no other. I more look up to her because she has that drive and that determination. She was a
Yes.
no joke, no nonsense from day one. So she
Oh,
has that within her, and I'm so proud of her. My brother, he didn't grow up with us. He grew up with his
dad.
maternal, his paternal grandparent. So he also has a very strong drive for success. So I think we all have that within us somehow. God placed that within us. My siblings on my father's side who are much younger, I know they do look up to me as their big sister. They also have their own way of achieving their goals as well. So I thank God every day for them and for the role that He has placed in my life to impact them as well
Yeah.
as them
Now,
impacting me.
yeah, I like the fact that you look at your younger sister as an inspiration to you, and I can't imagine the bond because you're so proud of her, and I hear it in your voice when you speak about her, and that's lovely. Now, you have now gone to UWI, you've achieved your dream, you have studied accountant. What next?
Hmm. What next? So currently, I mean, I even just to go back a little bit on my story and the impact that friends can have on your life. You know, we all started at a big four audit firm. Rhonda, myself, my other best friend, and we all back in 2005 we all were jittery. What next? What are we gonna do next? We're now at a big four audit firm. We're doing what we said we would do. I even left and went and worked at another organization, and we're like, what next? We can't stay here. We have to do something else. We all saw the an opportunity to migrate to the US by applying to an audit firm within the US during that time frame where when things were falling apart in certain areas with Sarbanes-Oxley and a lot of fall of a big four audit firm. So we decided that we're going to apply. We're going to take a chance and we're going to apply because we want to broaden our
Right.
horizon. So we
Yes.
did that, and they came to Jamaica, they did interviews, and we all were accepted. We all were granted positions. And my position or my place of work was Stamford, Connecticut. I've never heard of Stamford, Connecticut. I knew no one who lived in Stamford, Connecticut. I went and I found a map and I looked where Stamford, Connecticut was in the US. And by September of 2005, I was in Stamford, Connecticut. I knew no one. I know I was working at this audit firm, and they placed me they gave me somewhere to live for a month, and then after that, I had to find my way. But that's just how I mean, I always want to succeed. I always want to do more, and I always want to do something else. So right now, I'm a senior manager at not at a big four audit firm, and my what next? I don't know what next. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure out where that next step is going to take me, because somewhat I'm a CPA.
Yes.
Also I taken the ACCA exam back in England. I have to renew that membership, but I'm currently an active CPA
Remember.
here in the US and working at a big four audit firm. I'm very happy in my role and in my position. So next step, I'm still trying to figure that out. Somehow, I mean, one of the questions was one of your greatest regret, and one of my greatest regret was I've always want to be called doctor. So I wanted to to complete my PhD, but I my biggest regret was not having done that before I got married and started having children when I was younger. So maybe at some point that will be what next.
Yeah. Oh, Stacey, you are an inspiration. I am so proud of you. I'm so proud that I know you. Your story is an inspiration. It's profound and it says to everybody, your beginning is not going to be a drawback to you. It is an inspiration and it drives you and it keeps you humble because you, the Stacy that I know, the Stacy that I'm speaking to, the Stacy that I'm hearing is the same Stacy in terms of humility, but quiet confidence. And I really love that about you. Now, let me ask you, Stacy, you are a manager. You've achieved quite a lot of your dream. Do you see yourself mentoring any young person, or do you see yourself in the role of mentoring at this time?
I do, because I think there is so much to offer, especially to people who are young people who believe that their beginnings dictate where they will end up or what their future will look like. So that's also something that I really want to navigate and want to aspire to in the next chapters of my life. Obviously raising three young children, two young ladies and a young man, that is also somewhere where my energy is directed to, and empowering them and knowing that they can be what they want to be. So I think it starts at home, and I know that eventually that's where I want to go, as well as making people or young people see that they can be a difference. They don't have to be bogged down with where they what I mean what color spoon was there was placed in their mouth when they were born, or whether there was no
Yeah.
spoon at all. You can always acquire a gold spoon, figuratively or literally, if you put your mind to it. God is able. And I mean, I stand here speaking, it was nothing that I did, it was all because of the goodness of God that just keep running after me. That's pretty much.
Oh, yes, definitely. Now, we've heard your son. You've mentioned that you have three children. Tell me how you met your husband and how you became a wife and a mother. Tell me that story.
Okay, so I met my husband through an introduction from a mutual friend. My husband is a pastor in the Seventh day Adventist Church, and um, obviously always involved in church. And I guess she saw it fit to introduce us, and that's pretty much how we met. And a year later, or 2 years later, we got married. A year later, we had our first child. Her name is Leah. She's 9 years old. Then we had Layla, who is 6 years old, and we have Luke, who will be 4 in a few weeks.
Really? Now, no, let me ask you, why do you like the letter L?
You know what? I don't even know. My mind is very uniform. So once I start with, I could not name. I always liked the name Leah. So when I started with Leah, I had to find other L's,
L.
because if it was a boy first, maybe it would be Luke first. But
Yeah.
the way my
That's
mind works, if it's L, it just, whatever letter it is, it just has to stay that way.
That makes you unique. You're authentic to yourself, authentically you. Now, what is on your bucket list? What's on your bucket
Oh,
list?
my bucket list. I was speaking to my husband this week, and I said, you know what? I'd like to travel. I'd like to visit a few countries in Africa. So that's on my bucket list. Ghana maybe being the first place because I believe that's possibly where my ancestors are from. I'd like to touch the ground where they walked. I'd like to see the path that they took by resistance and by force to get to this part of the world where they were enslaved. I'd like to see their journey and take a walk to the path that they've walked. So I'd like to touch my feet on those grounds.
I can tell you that having visited the continent myself, it was very emotional. I am home. I am home. So you will feel you will have very strong feelings when you touch the continent, and I know you will have a really wonderful
Hmm.
time there. And I hope that will happen
Yes.
in the soon for you. Now, we've spoken about your humble beginnings. We've spoken about the fact that I like the phrase "drop down is not dead." I like your grit, your determination. What um, advice would you give to someone in a similar position to yours, as you were navigating life? What would you say to them? How would you encourage them?
You know what? I would say that you're young, you're beautiful because I've not always felt beautiful. I've had my insecurities growing up, the big lips, the big nose, the people not seeing you as beautiful, wearing my hair down in my face because I was not just hiding my face but hiding a whole lot of insecurities. I'd like to tell that young person that you're bold, you're beautiful, you're who God created for a purpose. Explore your passion and God will see you through. It's not where you're coming from again, it's where you're going. It doesn't matter what your beginnings are. What matters is what happened in between and at the end. The journey begins with you becoming aware of who you are. It's not what people see on the outside, it's not how you feel on the inside that determines your success. It's just navigating that path, holding the hand of God, and knowing that He will take you through no matter what situations. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be a bed of rose, but always remember that you have a purpose. God placed you here. And I like the scripture, Jeremiah 29, verse 11, that you started with. That's always also one of my favorite. God has a plan for you, and his end for you is one of purpose and passion, and one that is will be a delight to him. So make sure that you place your hands in the hands of God, and he will walk you through this life.
Wow. Place your hand in the hand of God, and He will walk you through the land. Now, are you still active in church?
I'm active. Yeah, I mean, I obviously I'm married to a pastor, so we're at church at all times when possible. I always tell people I'm always active and interested in whatever ministry my children are involved in. So if it's children's ministry, I'll be in children's ministry. When they grow up, I'd get involved in youth ministries, but I'd like to make sure that they are my priority. I don't want to sound selfish, but at the end of the day, God gifted them to us. We have to make sure that they're our priority as we raise them, along with bringing up everyone else around us. And whatever I'm asked to do at church, I'm always willing and able to do it. If you ask me to preach, I'll preach. If you ask me to sing, I'll sing, even though I'm not a great singer,
Yeah.
or I'll teach, or I'll minister, or I'll counsel, whatever it is. I'm never one to say no. I'm always one to be willing and able to do what God bids.
Lovely. You are giving of yourself, but you are also ensuring that you have enough for your children, and you have more other for others. But you will not put yourself in the position where your children don't have you pouring into them, because you have to begin at home. They
Yes.
need to be poured into from you, and I like that idea. Um, now, I want to find out um, the title of this podcast is "It Is Possible." If you know, if I were to ask you a question about what aspect of your life do you think allows you to say it is possible, what would you say?
It's hard to pinpoint one aspect, but it's just every area of my life. I mean, my humble beginnings has allowed me to see a life without boundaries. You know, a life that is filled with possibilities, a life that is filled with endless opportunities. You know, there's so many, there were setbacks in my life, and I saw how God just worked it out. And I know that it's impossible. It's possible because of him, and certain things or whatever situation that may arise that seem impossible. Remember that all things are possible with God once you pray about it and put it in his hands. There were instances, as I mentioned, you know, as I mentioned before, I came to the United States on a work visa. So I came in that capacity, and when that work visa was about to expire after renewing it for a couple of years, my next option was, what do I do now? Because either your company is going to file for you, or you may just have to go back to your country or find some
Mhm.
other way of surviving. So I thought, should I go back to Jamaica? I was navigating. Somehow I had some friends in South Africa, and I'm like, should I go to South Africa? They're
Wow.
also in the same field that I am in. So I was navigating that path, and one day I was at the gym, and you know, I got a call on my phone, and it was someone who used to be a mentor of mine saying, "Stacey, I need you to come and work for me. I need you to come and work for me as my and help me build this audit practice." And I was like, wow, God just worked it out. You know what? God worked it out. And that
Yes.
firm actually filed for me to be here today. And I'm like, God always works it out. When certain things seem impossible, it's there's so many times, there's so many testimonies I have of the possibilities once you put it in God's hand.
I like that. Once you put things in God's hand, the doors, the possibilities open up for you. But
Hmm.
you know, I am just amazed about this testimony that you've just shared with us, Stacey. You've renewed your work visa. You're thinking, what's next? You're at the gym. You get a call. Come and work with me. What did you think? I know you've said, but what went through your mind?
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't even recall what went through my mind, but all I know is I called up a few friends, and I'm like, this is it. I can now move on to something else with a possibility of achieving the impossible.
Achieving the impossible.
Yes.
Your story really epitomizes it is possible. Stacey, I have been blessed. I have really been blessed by your story, and the person that you have become. I I wouldn't know that you would have become this person because I think I've always seen you as this person, strong, determined, calm, confident. You know what you're about. I've never seen you as young and giddy. You know,
Mm-mm.
you've always come across as very mature, very, I know what I'm going to do, very calm, very polite, very respectful, but very assured. And it's interesting that your story has not been linear. It has had its curves and its dips and its mountains. But through it all, you've held on to Jesus. Through it
Yes.
all, you have never wavered in your relationship with Christ. And I find that to be heartwarming because not all young people have been able to hold on to Jesus while the road has been curving and meandering. mother, her impact. You've mentioned the inspiration that your mother has had on you. You've spoken about your siblings, in particular your sister, Dr. Dunn, I
Yes.
think, right? Um, and I know that your family must be very proud of you. Your friends must be very proud of you. I can imagine that your husband is extremely proud of you as well. Now, let me ask you, um, your son just came in, and I imagine that from the pictures that I've seen, I do think you have a very loving relationship with your children. Are you a strict mommy, or are you always a fun mommy?
You know what? I had this conversation the other day with my two daughters. I was being I was scolding them. I was telling them, you know what? I'm going to become a very strict mother, and they're like, "Mommy, I would not like that." So I'm like, I'm not. So I said to them, yeah, I'm not. I don't want to be strict, and I don't want to be too lenient either. I'm somewhat in between. I'll be strict and firm when I need to be, and then I'm also the one that they can call on. When was it? Sunday night. They wanted to have movie night, and there were things that were happening that wasn't going to allow me to do it, but I ended up canceling certain things, and we went to the supermarket and we bought snacks, and they were like, "Mommy, you're the best mommy ever." I'm like, just by doing that, they appreciate the little things so much. They were hopping and skipping and going to the car, and I'm like, look at that. Just buying them snacks and agreeing to sit and watch a movie with them. So I love to do fun stuff with them, but I also like to be firm when I need to be, even though sometimes I think I can be firmer, but I have such a soft heart. I will scold them, then I go aside and I'll scold myself. But they need to get it sometimes. But I try to be balanced for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, and you're making memories with them, and that's the important thing. They'll look back on these years and they'll remember when mommy did X, Y, Z with them. It's the memories that help to build the bond because, as I've said, the children at church, the adults your age will remember Auntie Pat for creating memories with them. They'll remember that pink uniform for the choir. They'll
Yeah.
remember all the songs that Auntie Pat taught them, and they'll remember how she treated them and the memories that they made with her. Stacy, it has been an honor having you on the program this evening. I know that my guests, my listeners, will be telling me later on how impressed and how moved and inspired they have been by your story. I want to ask you a question. And I'm hoping that you remember being a part of a poetry group at Portmore.
You cut out for a second. What was the?
Do you remember being a part of a poetry group in
Yes,
Portmore? Do
yes,
you remember that?
I do. And
And I think that's where I remember how mature you young ladies were. You were so there was no playing around when you had to do your rehearsals and you put your all into your presentations. And I must say, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life back then.
and
I
thank
really
you,
enjoyed
because
it.
you were an inspiration as well. We all looked up to you.
Oh, oh wow.
Yes, you were
I
someone
didn't
who
know that, but
you were always so kind to us. I enjoyed going to church and seeing you, to be honest. You were an inspiration.
thank you very much. Thank you. You have me getting teary eyed now. But thank you, Stacey. I'm happy that I connected with you. I'm so happy that I got to talk to you and to find out about your story. I liked the young lady that I knew as a teenager, and I am more impressed with who you are, your journey, and the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared with us this evening. You've spoken about holding the hand of God. You've spoken about the importance of words of affirmation. You've spoken about allowing, recognizing that life has no boundaries, that there are limitless options. And I'm hoping that anybody who listens and who will be listening and watching this podcast will be inspired by you and will be able to say, I have seen somebody who has come from humble beginnings who is doing very well, who's holding her head high. Not only that, she is a Nubian queen, and she's proud of her heritage. She wants to go to Africa. She wants to travel. She wants to share with others. And I am so happy that you're not keeping yourself to yourself. You're sharing yourself with others through church, in your workplace, and you're definitely blooming where you have been planted. Thank you ever so much for being my special guest this evening on It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sadia. It has been
And
a
thank you
pleasure.
so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, able to come. Awesome. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that has been a wonderful session with my special guest. I am so happy that you were here joining us today. And I want to thank you for being so attentive. I want to thank you for sharing in this wonderful experience of Stacey's story. Thank you for coming. And I want you to remember this: be a dreamer, a doer, and a thinker. See possibility everywhere. Because you are alive, everything is possible. But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Ladies and gentlemen, have a very good evening, and I'll see you on the 26th of this month. Take care. All good. Bye-bye.
Jesus, all things are possible. I can mount on wings like eagles and soar. When I call on Jesus, mountains are gonna fall. 'Cause He'll move heaven and earth to come rescue me when I call.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome.
What do I need
Thank
that?
you very much.
All right.
We are still live.
No. I cut the stream, so you
It
can
still
talk.
says live.
No, man, I cut it from. Hold on.
Stacy.